Hello, I have not lost my enthusiasm to make videos. For me, they are a challenge, because English is not my first language and it is not always easy to express yourself fluently in a video or in a comment. And sometimes people do not understand me very well what I want to say in a comment, as happened lately.
This cotton candy, pseudo-religious crap that atheists will eat. You know, I mean, these are atheists who are eating this shit. Dew in the morning, I mean, she knows who Charles Darwin is. What the fuck is she talking about? I mean, look, biological evolution has led to living beings valuing their own lives, parents valuing their children's lives as well.
In Mendham had misconceived what I had written in a comment to Professor Anton's video. But I confess that the blame is almost entirely mine, because I tried to cram as much information as I can in a short video, and that in a short comment, sorry, and that is not possible. What I meant to say is that evolution makes us value our lives. Evolution makes us value life in general. What I mean by that? Actually, I tried to put in that sentence the conclusion that I got from a book written by Jacques Monod, a molecular biologist and Nobel laureate. But of course, it is not possible. And I won't try to convey the contents of this book now, because it is not possible. You have to read it. Chance and Necessity, Jacques Monod. And Jacques Monod describes that there is directedness even from the chemical elements that made the first self-replicating molecule in the chemical properties. Stereospecificity is one, and then proteins are catalyzers, and so on. So there is some kind of functionality in directedness, purpose, although it is not conscious, of course, and living beings have this kind of functionality. Jacques Monod uses the term teleonomy. So evolution, because of pruning the mutations that are not useful to the organism, has refined, improved the feeling for value of one's life. And but I will talk about that in a minute, about life of others. Actually, why not talk about it now? The selfish gene was some kind of a satirical title that Richard Dawkins used, and I hear that he is sorry now that he used it because people misconceived it. What many other scientists, a small army of scientists, have written books about it. What they mean is not that the genes do anything by themselves. The theory only describes how genes which are good in a certain circumstances, they work well with other genes, they are left in the future generations. Now, about valuing other people's lives, altruism, empathy, and so on, there are, I wrote in the comment, mechanisms. What other words can I use? Processes of evolution that led to genes which predispose a person to commit self-sacrifice for the sake of another person, to have altruism, empathy for other people in himself. Those genes, there are ways through which they went to future generations and are in the population now. That is why it is not right to use the expression unintelligent design. This phrase was created only as an answer to intelligent design, but unintelligent design is not the right phrase to use for evolution, because there is no designer, intelligent or not intelligent, and yes, mutations are a chance happening, completely random thing, but that is the chance in the title of Jacques Monod's book. But necessity, that is natural selection, that selects only mutations that have been expressed, mutations in the genetic code that are expressed in the production of certain proteins and the way those proteins act, and selects the best of them. And that is why evolution has led to more and more complex organisms, and the species Homo sapiens sapiens has the most complex central nervous system and brain. And already with this brain, and because this species is social species, needs communication among people, and people have created language for this communication. In the language they generalize from the things that they see, make abstractions and make concepts and use that for quick and easy communication. Life is one such concept, because life is not an entity that exists, a united entity that exists somewhere. What we mean by life, that is a very short word for every living organism on earth. That's what we mean by life. That is why Efilists, this video I will talk about Efilists and not anti-natalists, because I understand that some anti-natalists, what they mean is to reason with people that you should be ready to have a child and to raise a child until he's an adult, and not just have children for the sake of it. I share that opinion, and in this respect I am an anti-natalist. But Efilism, this comes from the turning over of the word life, fu. This was quite a childish game. I remember when I was a child, we used to often turn words around, and that was very funny. The name Robin, for example, was Nibor, and so on. It was easier in my tongue because there are not so many silent letters there. Also, children are very creative, aren't they? I remember we had created a language of our own, secret language, which, when we spoke it in front of our parents, we understood each other, but our parents couldn't. Can you tell you what the secret of this language was? What we did was, in front of every syllable, we used the sound P. And I will try and demonstrate that in English. But it is not so good in English because in my language there were not so many one-syllable words, while in English there are. For example, pie, pifi, pilism, piis, pinot, pia, pico, pirect, pifi, pilo, piso, pifi. But you should, when you practice, you can say this very quickly, and somebody that speaks the same language can understand it and the parents can't. Anyway, what is the philosophy of the Efilists? Life doesn't have a meaning, life is no use to the universe, which is a completely meaningless sentence, because life doesn't have any use or meaning for the universe. The universe is not a thinking, evolved being with a sense, a concept of meaning. So you can't say that. Of course, life doesn't have a meaning for the universe. Life has a meaning only for the living beings themselves. Another thing, that Efilists say life is a constant cutthroat competition. That is not true. And the books that I talked about, biologists, scientists, describe how and why life is not only competition, but a lot of cooperation, striving to achieve things, love, and so on. Another thing that Efilists say is that life is dirty. Yes, we know that living beings produce slime, snot, sweat, poop, menstrual blood, and so on. But evolution again has taught us in the following way. People who had such a mutation that they happened to like poop and the other dirty things, they got infected and got a disease and died, so their genes were not taken to the next generation. And that is how evolution has made us not like such things, and building sewers and so on to get away from them. So that is how Efilists look at life or at the world. But there are other people, the majority of people, look at life or their own life in a different way. They enjoy life. They know that there is some suffering in life, but there are long periods when there is no suffering, but enjoyment of life. Very important is overcoming challenges, achieving things, striving towards something, and so on. So by this I mean to say that yes, people are different. There are people with different characters. And yes, some of them have such a trait in their character that they see the world in dark colors, while others, just the opposite, see the world in bright colors. They wouldn't say, I wish I was never born. And this is not just my opinion, but again, scientists, molecular biologists, geneticists have done a lot of studies, and they confirm what I just described. For example, the book Living Without Genes by Dean Hamer and Peter Copeland. They are molecular biologists. They talk about a young science, behavioural genetics. And there are many good things in their book, but my attention was caught by, for example, they talk about certain traits in humans' characters. Some people have, they talk about certain traits in the character of people. One is novelty-seeking. From this trait, some people have a high level of this trait, novelty-seeking. They are usually people who are predisposed to optimism, seeing the world in bright colors, enjoyment of life, while the low level of this trait is the opposite. And also they talked about another trait, harm-avoidance, the high level of which is characteristic of people who are prone to depression, they're pessimists, and they see the world in dark colors. And they discovered, and they describe all the studies and tests with many people, especially twins, and so on. They discovered a gene. The name of the gene is D4DR, capital letters. Which gene, if some of the ingredients of it are missing, and it has two variants, one of which is shorter, the other one is longer. And they discovered that the shorter variant of this gene is strongly correlated to people with a high level of harm avoidance, and it is statistically a lot more common for them to be pessimistic, to suffer from depression, commit suicides, and so on, and generally see the world in a very dark way. While people that have the other characteristic there was a strong correlation with the longer variant of this gene, and they have different traits in their character. They are not like the ones that I described until now. So, what does that tell you? Why have I said all these things? The philosophy of Efilism, that life is dirt, that life doesn't have any meaning. That's not true. Life has a great meaning. Life has value and worth for the living beings themselves. That is true. So that is not true from their philosophy. Life is dirty. Yes, some people see life as dirty. Other people, yes, no, they know that we poop and do all the other things, but we try to get away from this as far as possible. And we make technologies for that. So that is not correct. And also, another thing, there is not one entity, life. No, we, our species as a social species, we make generalization, we make abstractions, and we create concepts, and that is what life is. We cannot talk, this philosophy cannot use life in any kind of construction, because what you can use, what you have, is separate living beings or human beings. That's what you can work with. And living beings, every one of them has his own life. In this life there are periods which are bad, there are periods that are good. And that's where the balance should be made between these two things. Because you don't have a separate thing suffering in the world, or just as a separate entity. No, suffering, that is, you cannot talk about this separate thing and work with it, or pleasure. What you can work with is the whole human being, every specific being in his life, and make a balance there between suffering and enjoyment of life. And also, you should take into account that there are people with different characters who have a different opinion to that same thing. So, what I meant to say was that, first, life is not just one thing, and we cannot characterize this entity, it doesn't exist. And second, that this philosophy is characteristic for only one type of people who see the world or life. Yes, I'm using this word because this is part of our language. You know what I mean. The way they look at things is not characteristic for everybody. So it is unfair for them to impose all this to the other people. And they say, you impose life, this bad thing full of suffering, on the unborn child, which is meaningless, again, the same as the sentence, life doesn't have any use for the universe. It is meaningless because there is no somebody to impose life on. But if I use their vocabulary, I could say that then you deprive the unborn child from enjoyment of life, because it is very, very possible, probable that that child will be have these traits of characters which make you optimistic and enjoy life and have fulfillment in life. I hope that I have been coherent in this video. Bye!